Everyone, I know this sounds crazy, but after the biggest fight with my wife, my mother-in-law showed up to comfort me. And everything changed in a way I never expected. It was sweet, painful, and completely messed with my head. If you're new here, hit subscribe and like so you don't miss the full story. A few weeks ago, my marriage was already hanging by a thread. I came home every night feeling invisible, exhausted from work and constantly arguing over the smallest things. That night, after yet another screaming match where my wife stormed out to her friend's place, I sat alone in the dark living room, feeling completely drained and unwanted. I had always tried to be the good husband, biting my tongue during fights, handling everything quietly while telling myself this was just normal marriage stress. Deep down, I felt trapped in a routine that left me emotionally starving, but I kept reminding myself I had vows to honor. The doorbell rang the next morning, pulling me from the fog. It was Elena, my mother-in-law. She stood there with that soft, elegant smile, a bag of groceries in her arms, her eyes full of quiet concern. Before I could say much, she stepped inside and pulled me into a hug. Her arms wrapped around me tight, warm, lingering just a second longer than they should. The scent of lavender from her skin drifted close, wrapping around me like something I didn't know I'd been missing. Her breath brushed my shoulder as she whispered, "I heard what happened. Let me take care of you for a bit." My heart stuttered. I pulled back quickly, the guilt hitting like a cold wave. This isn't right, she's my wife's mom. What am I even doing letting her stay here while my wife is gone? I told myself to keep distance, focus on fixing my marriage, not complicate everything further. But she moved through the house like she belonged, and packing groceries, humming that old jazz tune from family dinners. Her presence filled the empty rooms with a gentle warmth that made the silence feel less heavy. Over the next few days, she cooked my favorite meals, the aroma of herbs and home filling the kitchen. We sat on the couch watching old movies, her shoulder occasionally brushing mine as we shared the blanket. She listened without judgment, her voice low and steady when I spoke about the fights, the loneliness. One evening, rain tapped softly against the windows. A slow jazz song played low in the background, the same one that used to drift through family gatherings. Elena placed her hand on my shoulder, her fingers warm and soft through my shirt, pressing gently into the tight muscles there. The touch lingered. Heat seeped through the fabric, stirring something deep I tried desperately to ignore. Her breath was calm, steady, while mine caught in my throat. In my head I kept repeating, "She's just being kind." But why does this feel so good? Why does her closeness make the ache in my chest ease just a little? I shifted slightly, fighting the pull, the gravity drawing me toward her. She was family, forbidden, yet in that moment, with the rain and the music and her lavender scent so close, but so close, the line between comfort and something more blurred dangerously. Late one night, after too much wine loose and the words between us, another tearful talk about my failing marriage hung in the air. The room felt smaller, warmer. Elena leaned in, her eyes searching mine with that quiet authority only she seemed to have. The line broke then. We ended up in each other's arms, her silk robe slipping under my fingers as the scent of lavender mixed with the heat rising between us. What started as comfort turned into something deeper, more intense, secret nights unfolding where her gentle guidance made me feel desired again, alive in a way my marriage hadn't in years. All while we hid it from the world and my absent wife. And then, as her fingers traced slow circles on my back, my wife's text lit up my phone on the nightstand, "I'm coming home early." I couldn't stop noticing her after that night. Every morning she moved through the kitchen with quiet grace, pouring coffee, the steam rising between us like a secret we hadn't named yet. Her fingers would brush mine when she handed me the mug, just for a heartbeat. Warmth lingered on my skin long after she pulled away. This is wrong. She's my wife's mother, I'd think, staring into the dark liquid while my pulse quickened. Yet the house no longer felt hollow. Her lavender scent clung to the air, pulling me back to that hug at the door, making me feel seen in a way my wife hadn't in months. Days blurred into this careful dance. I'd catch myself watching her from the hallway as she folded laundry, the soft light catching the curve of her neck. My mind split in two, one part screaming to keep distance, the other craving the way her presence filled the emptiness. She was older, wiser, carrying that calm authority that made everything feel steadier. I told myself it was just gratitude. Nothing more, but when her hand accidentally grazed my arm reaching for a book, electricity shot through me, sharp and undeniable. I stepped back too quickly, mumbling an excuse, heart hammering like I'd been caught stealing something precious. Evenings grew heavier with unspoken weight. We sat on the couch longer each night, sharing stories under the low glow of the lamp, her voice wrapped around me like warm silk, low and steady, asking questions my wife never seemed to have time for. "You've been carrying this alone for so long," she'd say softly, and something inside me cracked open. The rain started one Tuesday, tapping insistently against the windows while a faint jazz melody drifted from the old record player. She noticed the tension in my shoulders and offered to help, her fingers pressing gently into the knots there through the thin fabric of my shirt. The silk of her blouse whispered against my back as she leaned in closer. Heat bloomed where her palms worked, slow and deliberate, easing the ache I'd ignored for years. I forgot how to breathe for a moment, the room shrinking until all I could focus on was her nearness, the faint floral trace mixing with the rain's earthy smell, her breath steady and calm against my ear. "Stop this now," my mind begged. "She's family. This comfort is crossing every line. But God, I needed it so badly." The gravity between us felt magnetic, pulling me toward surrender even as guilt clawed at my chest. I shifted slightly, fighting the urge to lean into her touch, my own breath coming uneven. Her hands paused, lingering on my shoulders. The music swelled softly, rain drumming a rhythm that matched the pounding in my veins. I turned my head just enough to meet her eyes. Those warm, understanding eyes that held no judgment, only quiet tenderness. In that fragile pause, everything hung suspended. "I see you," she whispered, her voice barely above the rain, "the way you've been unseen for too long." The words landed like a key turning in a lock I didn't know was there. My restraint frayed further, hesitation melting into a deeper, quieter longing that scared me more than any fight with my wife ever had. I admitted it then, voice trembling in the dim light. How invisible I'd felt in my own marriage, how the routine had starved me of simple connection. She listened, her hand still resting warm on my arm, thumb tracing the smallest circle that sent sparks racing under my skin. The almost moment stretched. Her face inches from mine, breath mingling, the lavender scent enveloping me completely. I could feel the heat radiating from her, the soft fabric of her blouse brushing my sleeve. 1 millimeter closer, and the confession hung between us, raw and trembling, as thunder rolled outside, echoing the storm building inside my chest. What was I becoming? The wine sat between us on the low table, half-empty glasses catching the dim lamplight like secrets we hadn't named yet. Her fingers brushed mine when she refilled mine, lingering just long enough for the warmth of her skin to seep through. I told myself it was the alcohol loosening my tongue, nothing more. But when she leaned closer to hear my next broken sentence, her shoulder pressed softly against mine, and the room tilted. "I can't believe I'm doing this." But her scent, lavender mixed with something deeper, like sun-warmed linen, unwrapped around me and drowned it out. Sound her waist without permission, pulling her in until there was no space left for doubt. Her body molded against mine in the heated embrace, soft curves yielding in a way that made my pulse thunder. We sank into the couch together, breaths mingling hot and unsteady, her fingers threading through my hair as if anchoring us both in this forbidden gravity. The line vanished in that instant. Guilt screamed somewhere far away, but the ache of being truly held silenced it. Her lips hovered so close I could taste the wine on her breath, yet we stayed suspended there, trembling on the edge of surrender. I gave in completely, letting the storm inside pull me under. What followed were stolen nights when the house grew quiet and shadows lengthened across the walls. She'd come to me after midnight, her steps light on the creaking floorboards, slipping into the guest room where I'd been sleeping alone for too long. Her experience guided us with a quiet confidence that left me breathless, every touch measured and knowing, like she understood the hunger I'd buried for years. The way her hands moved over my shoulders, tracing slow paths that ignited sparks beneath my shirt, it made me feel seen, desired in a depth my wife had stopped offering. Yet every moment carried the sharp edge of fear. We'd freeze at the slightest sound outside, hearts hammering in unison, her breath catching against my neck as we listened for tires on the gravel. "We have to be careful," she'd whisper, her voice a velvet thread in the dark, but her body betrayed the words, pressing closer as if the danger only fueled the pull. those secret hours blurred into a haze of intense connection. Her quiet laughter when I fumbled with hesitation, the way she'd hush my doubts with a single finger against my lips. Each shared glance across the breakfast table the next morning feel like walking a razor wire. Listening to the faint song drifting from the old radio in the hall. Some slow melody about lost chances and second hearts. The texture of her skin under my palm felt like home I wasn't supposed to claim, warm and impossibly soft, pulling me back in even as shame coiled tighter in my gut. This feels so right here in this stolen bubble. But how did I let it spiral this far? The question echoed every time her fingers traced idle patterns on my arm, reigniting the craving despite the growing weight in my chest. I catch myself during the day replaying fragments, the way her breath had quickened when our eyes locked too long, or how her presence filled the empty spaces my marriage had hollowed out. She never pushed, only offered that steady calm that made surrender feel inevitable, but the internal war raged louder with each passing night. One part of me whispered to stop before everything shattered, while the other drowned in the magnetic draw of her nearness, the lavender lingering on my clothes like evidence I couldn't wash away. Last night, as the rain returned softly against the windows, she turned to me in the dimmance, her hand resting on my chest where my heart betrayed every conflicted beat. "Tell me what you need," she murmured, the words brushing warm against my collarbone. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came, only the trembling realization that stopping now might break me more than continuing. The almost moment stretched again, heavy with unsaid promises, her body inches from mine under the thin sheet. And then her phone buzzed faintly on the nightstand. A message lighting up the screen in the dark. Her phone buzzed faintly on the nightstand. A message lighting up the screen in the dark. I froze, the thin sheet suddenly feeling like ice against her skin. The glow cut through the room like an accusation, and before I could even blink she reached for it, her fingers brushing mine in the scramble. The words on the screen hit harder than any storm. On my way home early, traffic was light, be there in 20. My wife, coming back. Now, the illusion shattered in that single heartbeat. We were still tangled in the guest room bed, her body so close I could feel the rapid rise and fall of her chest against me. The warmth that had felt like salvation just seconds ago now burning with panic. I bolted upright, heart slamming against my ribs, fumbling for my clothes scattered on the floor like evidence of a crime I couldn't deny anymore. She sat up too, hair falling across her shoulders, eyes wide with the same sudden terror that twisted my gut. This secret comfort, it had become an addiction I never saw coming. What started as her gentle hand on my shoulder after that brutal fight with my wife had pulled me under night after night, each whispered conversation, each lingering glance across the kitchen table feeding a hunger I thought was long dead. But now reality crashed in, cold and unforgiving. We were about to get caught, and everything I'd built, to my marriage, this fragile family piece, teetered on the edge of ruin because I'd let desire win in those weakest moments. I pulled on my shirt with trembling hands, the fabric catching on my damp skin, while she quickly smoothed the sheets, her movements efficient yet laced with that same quiet grace that hadn't done me. "We can't. This has to stop," I whispered, but my voice cracked, betraying how desperately I'd needed to feel wanted again. She looked at me then, her gaze soft with understanding and something heavier. Regret, maybe, or the same aching pull that kept drawing us back. In the dim light from the phone, I saw the cost written across both our faces. Standing there half-dressed, listening for the distant sound of tires on gravel that would seal our fate, I felt the weight of my choices settle like lead in my chest. When my wife's absence left nothing but silence, I let my mother-in-law's comfort become more than solace. I owned that hunger, that craving for connection that made me surrender again and again, even knowing the devastation it could bring. The guilt pressed down, heavy enough to steal my breath, yet beneath it lingered the rot Ruth. Those nights had changed me forever. They'd reminded me what it felt like to be truly seen, held in a way that went beyond words, filling voids I hadn't admitted existed until she stepped in. But now, with my wife's message glowing like a warning, I saw the ruins clearly. The marriage I'd fought for, the family ties that once felt unbreakable. All of it threatened by my weakness. She touched my arm one last time, her fingers light as a secret, sending that familiar spark through me even in the panic. "Go," she murmured, voice barely above the rain tapping at the window. "I'll handle the rest," Her eyes held mine for a beat too long, that almost moment stretching again, heavy with everything unsaid. The what-ifs that would haunt me long after. I slipped out of the guest room just as headlights swept across the driveway, my pulse roaring in my ears. The house felt different now, every creak of the floorboards echoing my shame, every shadow a reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything. I replayed it all. Not the touches, but the way her presence had made the emptiness bearable, the magnetic draw that had felt inevitable. The internal war still raged, one voice screaming I'd destroyed what mattered most, the other whispering how alive I'd felt in her quiet embrace. This wasn't some clean break or easy lesson. The ache lingered, bittersweet and unresolved, a constant pull toward what we almost had. What we could never claim openly. I wondered if she'd feel it too, across the hall, or if the fear had finally snapped the thread between us. I was forever altered, carrying this hidden storm inside, wondering how one moment of surrender could rewrite the map of my heart. So tell me, everyone, do you think I did the right thing by letting my mother-in-law comfort me that way? Comment below with your honest take. If you want the raw details of those forbidden nights and the explosive confrontation that followed, like this video, subscribe, and comment I need the full story so I know to spill everything next time. Thanks for hearing my real confession. The rain kept falling long after the lights went out, and I lay there wondering if the hunger would ever truly quiet, or if it would always whisper her